Lucas, when I say golden hour, what do you think of?
Okay, I clicked on this link, Daniel. I was like, is this about the podcast or about something else?
Like the time of day. There's so many things that golden hour could mean. But what you should be thinking of when you hear golden hour is sweet tea in your camera lens.
Okay, I'm just gonna click this link real quick, and then move it over to my other tab here. And let me just describe to you what I'm seeing. It says, "Enjoy Coca-Cola with cookies," and then it's making me accept their cookies.
Yes.
So, but after that, this appears to be like a if you imagine a bag clip, like if you have some chips or something, you want to clip them shut, or it has a magnet on it, kind of thing. And then what looks like a cap for like if you bought a soda or something, like a cap,
kind of similar.
And then you fill it with tea, like Golden Peak sweet tea.
Yeah.
And then it seems to have a screw cap that screws over it so it's translucent. And then you clip this over your phone lens.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it. That's about right.
And then you take pictures through the tea.
And Moment better watch out. That's all I'm saying, because Gold Peak is coming for them.
This is a choice.
They show some sample pictures too. I can't tell if they're actual sample pictures, but they kind of remind me of like the Fuji sepia filter. You know, you get like a little bit of a brown tint in there.
Like maybe. I mean, there's some color in here too. Like your phone's going to try to white balance whenever you take a picture.
Yeah.
So like this has to be, it's like pushing it past its minimum white balance position. Like it goes down to 2200K and it's like still too warm. Yep. I love that this part of the website, it says, "Is this for real?" We know it's a little wild. Check out some amazing images. And then they have an Instagram hashtag filter.
Yep. I think you need to register for this. It's a free giveaway that you can register for to get one of these.
To get a clip for the thing?
Like to get the device that you can pour tea into and make these pictures.
No. Hard pass.
Well, you just keep doing your shooting on film thing, and I'm going to be over here taking pictures with my Gold Peak tea, and we'll see who's come out better.
I know that this sounds like camera gear, and it looks like camera gear.
This is camera gear.
It's not camera gear, Daniel. This is staying deliberately in the pre-show.
Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
Last time we talked, we kind of mentioned in passing how we haven't had any specific segments that are known to reoccur on this podcast.
Because all we've been doing is talking about all these new releases that came out in September. And it feels like all we do now is talk about new stuff.
Just newsy and terrible.
Yeah, we're like a camera blog.
Ugh. And so I'm bringing back some corners. I don't have a legendary lens for you. I'm sorry. I know I need, like, if we're going to get to 100, I mean, we gotta really get some stuff going. So later. Okay. But I do have a movie corner for you.
Okay.
Yep. So go ahead and play the segment music that you put together.
Oh, yeah, all that movie corner music that we definitely have.
Yeah. Just go ahead and play that now.
Yeah. Right. I'm just looking at you.
Okay. I forced you to go to the movies with me.
Yes.
For the first time in 100 years.
Yep.
And we went to go see The Creator.
Yeah.
Shot on the FX3.
Yep. Been hearing a lot about that one on the internet lately.
So that's like a lot of buzz. You know, Gareth, whatever his name is, shot the whole thing on FX3. It's like, what? Yep. This is crazy. And so, a lot of really cool videos out there talking about like how they shot the film and all this sort of thing. And so I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely interesting to see. And I mean, I thought it looked good. I mean, I would not have assumed that it was anything less than a normal cinema camera.
Yeah, no, it totally worked. Like, they shot the whole thing on anamorphic. They shot it super, super wide, too. They shot it at 2.79 to 1.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if you caught that whenever we saw it.
No,
but
I didn't really pay attention to that.
It was particularly wide, and I think it's because they wanted to do, like, almost like a Panavision type. Panavision, is that the right word? Cinerama type, like, super, super wide. Just to give it, like, more scale and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think, like, the most interesting thing around this movie that I've heard so far is a lot of the talk about like how they dealt with the budget and how they shot it. And
it costs less than most movies of this type, right?
yeah, exactly. Something like this you might budget at 300 million, and this thing costs like 80 million. And the reason they were able to save all that money is because instead of building the sets, they shot almost everything on location. So they shot in 80 different locations.
That's crazy.
It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And then instead of like doing all the CG and then working through the final cut and like having to throw away a bunch of CG effort, they like thought through everything and shot it in a way that they did the final cut before they even pushed it off to CGI.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. And
you see some of those scenes and it's like they must have just had like large blank areas in the scene while they were filming it and then also while they're editing it.
Yeah, like the amount of like CG in this movie was insane. There was so much.
Because like when you hear that, like before the movie, you're like, oh well, like they must have just like used CG in a couple of places or something. But there was a lot of CG in that movie.
I don't know if there was a scene without some sort of CG.
Yeah.
It was just super, super intense. But it's like they did these interesting things and made these interesting choices and like were able to shoot it on location, get these grand looking scenes, but then like still keep the budget a third of what you would expect it to be.
Yeah. Well, and they were probably able to do some of that by having like a stripped down camera setup and not needing like a huge crew to operate all that equipment.
Right, exactly. I think that the director himself actually operated the camera for a good portion of it because he's like, I know what I want, and like, so I'm going to run the camera. And having that smaller camera system that's more mobile, they're able to do a lot more gimbal stuff and like keep it all very tight, keep the crew down. And I mean, it was just really interesting to hear how they did a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, it seems like a newer, or something that hasn't really been done before. And you have to imagine there's going to be more things like that as cameras are getting better. And all that.
For sure. And it's like they leaned a lot into the whole, like, this doesn't have to be the most perfectly lit thing. And they were trying to get, some of those like 80s, 90s, 70s, like sci-fi look, like think of something like Blade Runner that has really harsh, deep shadows. And so they were trying to go for this like naturally lit dramatic look. And so most of the lighting was bounced, and their lighting person, they had like a mobile lighting person. And so they didn't like set up like lights like you would normally do. And they're like, this isn't working. Then you gotta like take 30 minutes and move the light.
Yeah.
They're like, you hold the light thing, and now we're going to move you over here. And so like, hey, we have someone that holds the sound stick. We can have someone who holds the light stick.
Well, and a lot of the look of that movie was very dark. So,
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I thought all of that was like super, super cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's interesting to see, movies kind of made in a different way. And I like seeing directors who want to kind of try to flip some norms on their head. And it's like, yeah, this is how we make a super huge budget, like Marvel movie or something, but we don't have to make every movie like that. And we can like do these different things and shoot things on location, and you can actually make it work and make a really cool movie.
I agree. I thought it came out good too. I mean, not just the way it looked, but I mean, we had kind of heard some mixed reviews of the storyline, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good movie.
Yeah, I would say for those who are following me on Letterboxd already know, I give it a 4 out of 5 stars.
That's pretty good.
Pretty big deal. This is kind of like feeds into this other thing that I have here on the topic list. So I'm going to skip over this other corner because, Daniel, I have 2 corners today.
That's a lot of corners.
Two segments.
Yeah, that's like half of a room.
But like a lot of the conversation about the creator has been, how did they shoot it, or the location thing, or, the CGI stuff, or like the camera itself. And like they shot this on a $4,000 prosumer camera. Oh, that's crazy.
Yep.
And it's like, yeah, they use a $10,000 lens too. And it's like, they put the money where it mattered. And like you listen to like the director or the cinematographer talk about it, and it's a lot of like, yeah, we use this $4,000 camera, but we put all of this money into paying like John David Washington and to building out these, elaborate sets and like, makeup and costume and set dressing and all of this stuff. And they're like the lighting and like all the things that you see, like all the money's on camera. It's like, we didn't have it all behind the scenes. It's like things that you see. And they talked about how that was kind of like the things that make it like a cinematic thing. And they just kind of dismissed all of the discussion about the lens and the camera and that sort of thing. And it kind of...
That doesn't bode well for us here today on the
don't.
Camera Gear podcast.
Just, we'll get to it. And so I'm curious kind of like, if you're thinking about like shooting a movie or something, or like you're framing out a scene or whatever, I mean, it feels like you can't do it without the camera. Like you have to have something that meets the minimum requirements. But I feel like you have like the camera and the lens and the gear, and then you have like the lighting and all that sort of thing. And then you have like the set and the set dressing and the scene itself. And it feels like all of those are kind of equally weighed in the whole creative process. And so I was curious if you think like, does one of those matter more than the other? Do you think that like they all matter equally? Like if you had a budget of, how much am I going to put into these three categories? And one's the gear, one's the scene, and like one's like the lighting. How are you going to like divvy that up? What do you think's the most important?
That's a hard question to answer. I mean, it probably just really depends on what you're doing. But I mean, I feel like the correct answer, but also like the meme answer to this is to say that the camera is the least important part. And, that doesn't sound that great for us to say because we like talking about cameras and we like all the gear. But I think the reality is that now cameras are so good that, unless you're talking about like a literal, like shoestring budget, like I need to make a movie for $200, like assuming you're not, at that level, I think that generally you're better off putting the money into like lighting and the set dressing. And we were talking the other day about how set dressing seems like one of the things that can really set like an amateur production apart from a professional one. And I think that's something that gets lost a lot whenever people watch YouTube and learn about filmmaking from people on YouTube, because you watch all these videos and you see people talking about cameras, talking about the gear, talking about color grading and all that stuff. And like you really think that that's the huge focus. But I mean, it seems like you can make something that is shot very well and still have it look super amateur if you're not doing anything in the scene, if you're not doing any makeup or anything like that. And so I feel like if you're trying to do a big production, that's like spending money on the lighting and on the set, like the things that are in front of the lens is what's going to go farther toward making it look like a planned, like real production.
Yeah, for sure. It's like you can do that, and then like the camera itself, it's like if it meets the minimum viable option of like what are we trying to achieve here? Like, does it have to shoot raw? Can we get away with log only? And like all this sort of thing. Then like you can pick the minimum viable option and then move forward with like, what do you see, and putting the money actually on scene and on the screen.
I mean, you can just think about like, think about movies that you like that were made 30 years ago. You can get, most people listening to this podcast probably have a camera that is as good as a lot of those older cameras, if not much better. And so, would you be happy making a movie that looks the way your favorite movie from the 80s did? And like, if so, then you probably don't need to spend more money on your camera to make that.
Yeah, for sure. I think that like those are the kind of things that really set, certain directors apart. Like the things as far as, setting up the scene, doing the blocking, planning these camera movements, and understanding like how that look and feel works, and like knowing like how you're using the gear and all this sort of thing. And that's why, people like, Steven Spielberg or whatever are so well recognized, is because of like how they know how to use like what's there.
I mean, yeah, it's like as the director, you need to know, like you need to at least know how to tell somebody what you want from the camera. And you need somebody in that, in that situation who can run the camera, obviously. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be successful. But it's kind of funny because it's like the director also has to be like a good interior designer almost, like you've got to be able to just like somebody has to be able to like lay out a scene that's going to look good and like focus the viewer on the things you want them to see and not have anything distracting in the scene. I mean, all that stuff is so important.
It reminds me of like one of the interesting things that they talked about with the creator was how normally if you're whenever you're doing this and you're setting up the scene and you're deciding on costumes and like everything that's going to be on camera, there's a color palette normally. Like you'll say, this is the colors that we're achieving in this scene, and how they complement each other, and like how that's going to draw focus to what you're actually showing and all this sort of thing. And like so much thought goes into what's the color profile of everything on camera. Yeah. And whenever they shot the creator, because they shot everything on location, they let the scene itself inform the color palette. And so they're like, okay, here's a daytime scene. We're going to focus on using earthy tones. There's going to be a lot of greens and browns. Here's a nighttime scene. So everything's going to have like a blue overtone to it. So let's do all of the lighting very warm. So we have this teal orange situation happening. And they did a lot of that throughout the movie, where if they knew they were going to have a lot of greens, then like they were going to focus on the green being the predominant color in the scene. And it worked really well. And like the colors were all very congruent and complementary, and just they worked. And it's like they worked with what they had, and they planned all that out ahead of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And We don't talk about things like that much, but that matters as much as what f-stop you're shooting at.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. Sure does. And I mean, obviously, f-stop, you're going to shoot wide open. So
Yeah. Just to lock it wide open.
Cool. So that's my movie corner.
Yeah.
And
I think people should watch that movie.
Yeah.
I think it's a good reminder that you don't need a, $20,000 cinema camera to make something. And I thought it was a good movie, and it did some interesting stuff.
For sure. I would definitely underline that and say that, I feel like the XH2S probably takes as good a video as the FX3. I know it's a bold claim, but as a Fuji representative / fanboy, I'm required to make this statement.
Anybody who's still listening to this podcast after all this time probably agrees with you.
So what I'm saying is, like, the camera that you got is probably good enough to make like a full level motion picture if that's like your jam, and just don't let the other things stop you.
Well,
right?
what's stopping you, Lucas?
Time.
Fair.
Yeah, I'll get around to it eventually.
Yep,
I think it's really encouraging, and like that's the big reason. If you're like a gear junkie, like watch this movie because it's like they made this with like a Ronin and a Ninja and a FX3, and that it's just really cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, you mentioned in that whole spiel of you going on about cameras in the 80s, buying old cinema cameras. Daniel, it's another edition of my CineCam corner.
We've had at least one of these before. I don't know if we've had more than one, but we've had at least one of these before.
There's only been one, and I had to go back and listen to that episode because I couldn't remember what I named this segment. I did not name it. So right now we're going with CineCam corner until I can come up with a better name.
Okay.
That one is alliterated and has 3 words in it, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. Starting strong.
But we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
All right.
Okay. Now, I wanted to tell you about the Panasonic VariCam LT, because to me, that's the more interesting of the two. And I feel like if I was going to convince you to buy a Panasonic camera, it would be the Panasonic VariCam LT until the S1H Mark II comes out.
Yep.
So my goal here is to convince you that we're going to talk about some other cameras later, and I feel like you secretly want one of those. My goal here is you walk away from this conversation to be secretly wanting this camera instead.
All right.
And that's the VariCam LT.
All right. Well, let's convince me.
But first we have to talk about the VariCam 35 because I couldn't find a single movie that was shot on the VariCam LT.
Not a point in favor of it there, Lucas.
But Daniel, you see, the VariCam LT and the VariCam 35 have the exact same sensor in them. So I think for you personally, the LT is the right choice.
Okay. Well, let's go through these then.
Okay, so we're going to talk about 35 first.
Okay.
This is a Super 35 4K cinema camera, released originally in 2014.
Okay. So it's not ancient.
No, 9 years old, something like that. They still sell it. You can still buy this thing brand new for $55,000.
Pretty high.
But you're not going to, Daniel. You're
Okay.
going to go to MPB or eBay, and you're going to buy this thing for $6,000.
And this is the 35 that you're talking about.
Yeah, this is the 35. Now, the LT, which is the one that you're actually going to buy, not this one, about $4,000.
Okay.
It's a little cheaper.
Okay.
It's smaller. This thing's like 11 kilograms. It's huge.
It's pretty heavy. It's like 25 pounds.
The LT, which is an actual camera that we're talking about, sort of. I have to talk about 35 because this is the one that they shoot movies on. The LT is like 5 or 6 kilograms. It's like half the weight.
Okay.
It's way smaller. Anyway, this Super 35 8-megapixel cinema camera with its built-in NDs was a landmark at the time because it can shoot 4K.
Yeah. I mean, back in 2014, that would have been unusual.
It's out here competing with Arri, who didn't even have a 4K camera. You're still shooting 1080p if you're shooting Arri.
Filthy casual.
Oh, the worst. So if you want that resolution, you want 4K, you want Netflix certification, I mean, you got to go VariCam.
Yep. Was Netflix around in 2014?
I don't worry about that, Daniel. Yes, it was around in jeez, come on. Probably. Now, this thing can shoot 1 to 60 frames per second. Pick a frame rate.
Like 3?
Yeah.
You can shoot 3 frames per second?
Sure, why not? It's a VariCam, dude.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
36 frames per second? Yeah. Obviously.
48 is the best frame rate, just so you know.
Crank the dial.
Yeah.
And don't stop baiting me. Yeah, there's been some firmware updates and some additions to this thing. It can shoot 4K up to 120 frames per second.
I mean, that's pretty impressive for something from 2014.
I'm just saying, this thing is highly competitive. It's the correct sensor size. It can shoot all this 4K stuff. You can shoot like your high frame rate. It's basically equivalent to like a C300 Mark II or like a Sony FS7.
Interesting.
It's got dual native ISO on that sensor, up 5,000 ISO for the higher end, 800 for the low end. It's pretty good in low light.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I mean, and then you get Vlog.
Pretty cool.
Yep. If you want to shoot on RAW, you can get this like codex thing. They just slap on the back of it, make it even bigger and heavier, and then you can shoot in VRAW.
VRAW.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it does all the things. It shoots Vlog. You can shoot in like Panasonic's log profile. You can shoot in ProRes 4444 HQ. And as I mentioned previously, I'm a 444 guy.
Yeah, you've said that.
This is a pretty big deal, Daniel. They can shoot in 4444. It's 4/4. Okay, got it.
So
what are you thinking?
Well, let's think about this. So you said this is 6,000 used.
Yep.
Compare that to something around the same price now. Like a newer camera.
Let's say like a Komodo X maybe.
Yeah, sure.
Or let's see.
A C70 is around the same price?
Sure, C70. Mm-hmm. That's Super 35.
Yeah. So what would you rather have?
I mean, obviously this, because it can shoot in RAW. I know the C70 can shoot in RAW. But, I mean, it's heavier, so that's better.
Yeah, heavier is always better.
It's got built-in NDs.
True.
It shoots to P2 cards, whatever that means.
Yeah.
So the memory's way more expensive.
I was going to say, I'm sure those are cheap.
I mean, this thing's got like 12G SDI out. I can't connect SDI to my C70.
That's true.
I think.
I don't know. I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, you're quizzing me on C70 without having done any sort of backup C70 spec reminders.
Yep.
I can't keep all this stuff
straight.
I'm
kind of just like, not even that camera specifically, but just, do you feel like this is are the specs of this competitive enough with modern cameras that you would actually consider buying this over
I would say that it's comparable, and that you're probably like, obviously like runtime matters and that sort of thing, like you're buying used, but I think that there is enough weight with like shooting on an actual cinema rig, and like you're getting things like all the time code stuff and like your SDI, multiple SDI outputs and power outputs, and you can interchange your viewfinder and your monitor and all this sort of thing, and like you're getting all the things that come with shooting on a cinema camera that matter more for a production. Whereas if you're trying to retrofit something like a Komodo X or a C70, it may not be quite the same.
Okay, fair enough.
Plus, Daniel, I told you it has built-in ND.
You're really big on that now,
okay,
aren't you?
What else could I tell you? What are you looking for in a camera, Daniel? And I'll tell you this has it.
What kind of built-in, do you get like a built-in viewfinder or screen or anything? I mean, what does it have in that regard?
Daniel, you can pick whatever viewfinder you want, but there's multiple options. But one of which is pretty unique to the Panasonic, is you can get a viewfinder that connects to the SDI output and has a power output on the front. You just connect those two puppies, and then there's a little focus ring on that thing that you can use to zoom in for critical focus without zooming in on the actual frame.
Oh, that's
so you can
cool.
zoom in and then focus with your lens and then zoom back out from the viewfinder.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Get that critical focus.
Pretty neat.
Which is important if you're shooting on a lens that's not parfocal.
Ah, indeed.
Now, this does shoot on PL mount.
I was about to ask what lens mount it was.
Yeah. And I believe that's the only one for this one, though I thought maybe you could interchange the mounts.
Okay.
Which is important to note, because the LT that you're actually more interested in comes with EF mount that you can interchange to PL mount.
Interesting. So tell me about this LT then.
No, Daniel, first.
We're not there yet?
We're not there yet. I got 3 movies for you. You got to tell me which one was shot on the VariCam 35.
I forgot that was part of this.
That's the whole part. This is the quiz show part of the show. Okay.
All right, what do we got?
You got The Finest Hour, starring Chris Pine. Bleh. That's right. That's Chris Pine, right?
I don't know. I've never heard of this movie.
Jeez. This is not helpful. Manchester by the Sea, which I think does that have Josh Duvall in it? Anyways, it doesn't matter. Or, so Finest Hour, Manchester by the Sea, or Crazy Rich Asians.
I remember when Crazy Rich Asians came out. I'm going to go with Finest Hour. That's my guess.
It's wrong, Daniel.
It's wrong.
It's Crazy Rich Asians.
See, I thought that movie came out recently enough that a 2014 camera would not have been used to shoot.
Came out in 2018.
Okay.
And they used the
4-year-old camera.
Yeah, and they used the Varicam.
Interesting.
Yeah, save some money.
Yeah.
Use a very good camera that's still a little cheaper.
Yeah.
There you go.
Pretty cool.
Now, Manchester by the Sea made use of both of these used Arri Alexas. Manchester by the Sea used K35 lenses though, which, if you'll recall, is a legendary lens.
And that's how it ties in.
Yep. So it's just
nice.
All right.
Nice.
So now to talk about this real camera that you want. So it doesn't do 4K RAW like the 35. If you want to shoot RAW, you gotta go out.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do SDI out to a Ninja or a Shogun, I guess.
Mm-hmm. To get like ProRes or something?
Get ProRes RAW 444.
Oh, so you
HQ.
can do RAW external. You just can't do RAW internal?
Right.
Okay.
And then you can slap your V mount on the back of this thing, and then instead of buying a like the whole eyepiece or whatever, you just buy the Atomos for your monitor, and then use that for the recording. And now you're recording to SSDs instead of these expensive P2 cards.
Yeah, that's a plus for sure.
Yeah, and then now you're getting your RAW recording. You can use EF or PL, so the lenses are relatively cheap.
Cool.
And you can got your internal NDs. It's the same sensor as the 35, and so you're getting those 14 plus stops of dynamic range. It still has like 2 power outputs, so you can you can like run to your follow focus and your Teradek or whatever. It's got time code. It's got all the things, Daniel.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it does.
I mean, you're a little limited in that, like, if you're going to shoot over 60 frames per second, you can't shoot in 4K.
Mm-hmm.
Those are 2K. Yeah. Unlike the 35, which could shoot 4K up to 120.
Yeah.
So, if you don't need 4K above 60 frames per second, I think this is for you.
I mean, it sounds pretty good.
It's better than like an S1H, which is similar.
I feel like you get a lot of street cred if you just show up with like a Varicam, or any kind of cinema camera.
Now, I know that they've shot more movies on the FX3 than the Varicam LT.
By at least one.
And this is basically the same price.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, this looks better to me.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, serious talk though, it has more of what you need than what you get on the FX3.
Mm-hmm,
because what the part that was left out on that whole movie thing is that not only did they use expensive lenses, but I mean, they rigged up that FX3. They weren't just like running around hand-holding.
No, they like
FX3.
using V mounts and all this stuff.
So that's something that you generally get with cinema cameras like this is, I mean, not that you don't have to rig them because you do, but you generally get more things built in, more direct support for stuff that you would otherwise have to like cobble together some kind of rig for. And so I feel like it's a pretty good reason to go with a cinema camera if you're doing like a serious production.
I'm just saying, like, there's some like 2011 to 2014 era cinema cameras that still hold their own to like modern high-end mirrorless stuff. That's basically the same price or cheaper.
I mean, it'd be fun, right? Like it'd be cool to have some older cinema camera and just like get to play around with one, see what the benefits are to that without having to spend $50,000 on it.
So we covered the F55, the Cine Alta F55 last time, and I think I like that one more than this one, but I like this one more for you because it says Panasonic on the side and you can shoot in V-Log.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, this looks more appealing than your BS1H option.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Daniel, what does the BS1H bring you?
Half the price.
I thought you were going to say full frame. Then I was going to quit the podcast.
But no, I think it's cool. It does make you think that it'd be fun to look around and find a used something cheap. I remember Caleb Pike buying like an original red camera on eBay for like $1,000.
Yeah, those things are cheap,
pretty
man.
Cool. Yeah.
I think they shot some of those Marvel movies on the original red.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, they use a little bit of CG in those movies too, but
sure. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the BS1H.
I did.
Or someone mentioned it.
Yeah.
Which I feel like
it came up.
It's a pretty good segue for this next camera that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
Because it has the same sensor.
Indeed, it does.
Yep. So let's get into this Nikon cast and talk about the Z Cam.
Yeah, sounds great. We talked about a Z Cam a few weeks ago, right? The ZF. Yeah.
Yep. So, exactly.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. There are a lot of Z cams. Which one are you talking about specifically here?
Okay. So is the company called Zcam?
I think the company
like,
is called Zcam.
so Zcam makes the Zcam,
Yes.
or is it the Zcam and then they make the whatever?
Yeah, I think it's that. They have a bunch of different models.
Okay, so I put this on the list a little while back because they recently came out with the Zcam E2M5G?
Yep.
Question mark?
I think that's right. Yeah.
And then you were like, Lucas, why are we not talking about the E2 F6 Pro? And I was like, I don't know if I ever know anything about the E2 F6 Pro. So I looked up the E2 F6 normal, not Pro, and I was like, this camera seems like it's got a lot of problems.
I watched so Gerald Undone did a video on that camera earlier. He did it like 3 years ago. I watched it earlier, and yeah, there's a couple of problems with that camera.
But like the Pro is better, but it seems like it probably has all the same problems. And so like, I feel like we just got to talk about Zcam a little bit.
That's kind of what I'm interested to talk about because we need to go into detail on what those problems are, but anytime you see one camera from a company with issues like that, it kind of makes you wonder, is this just like a pattern? Is this how all their stuff is? Yeah. I'll say up front, I don't know the answer to that, but yeah. I don't know.
So like, let's back up a little bit and kind of like, what the heck is a Zcam? Because maybe like some people are uninitiated and they're still thinking this is a Nikon camera.
That they could be.
I know that I clarified that it wasn't, but it's pretty funny to pretend.
It is. It seems like they're basically, this is a company that makes sort of, they're kind of like cinema camera or cinema camera adjacent cameras. They all have a box format. They're all very compact and small. And to me, the other thing that sets them apart is that I think for the feature set that they have, at least on paper, they're priced very low for what you get.
Right. These are the like budget box camera cameras.
Yep.
If you like, you need some sort of box cinema something, and you're like trying to save as much money as possible, this may be the way to go.
Yeah. So whether that's like live streaming or, some sort of multicam studio setup or a crash cam, or if you're wanting to shoot a movie and you just don't have a lot of budget for a camera, that's kind of, I think, their market space.
Okay. Yeah. And in traditional fashion, I wouldn't say they're poorly named because the names do make some sense. If like you know how to decode them, they're like BMW model numbers.
Yeah, they're a little confusing though.
But there's so many. And so essentially they have like the first letter is the body style. So right now they're on the E2. So any E2 Z cam you buy is going to be basically the same body.
Right.
Maybe some slightly different ports on it, I guess, but for all intents and purposes, like the same body.
Yeah.
And then after that, they'll list the sensor size. So like the E2M4 is a micro four thirds camera. The E2F is a full frame camera. The E2S is a whatever. And then
Super 35.
Right,
yeah.
Super 35. And then the next number, I think, is the generation. So like S6, S5, or like M4.
Yep. There's an M4, and then the one that kind of brought this topic up is an M5. So there's a newer one of that.
Right.
And then they have the last letter, which sometimes there's no last letter. And then sometimes there's a G on the end, and the G stands for global shutter.
Right. And then what confuses me, though, is they have an E2C, and I don't know what that is.
That one seemed like it was pretty cheap when I looked it up. I think the E2C, like there's nothing after that, just E2C. And I think that one was like $900. It's micro four thirds. And it reminded me a lot of that new Blackmagic. I can't remember what the name of it was. It was like a studio camera micro or something. Blackmagic has something they released that's pretty similar. It's about $1,000. So I think that's kind of like it's more for like a live streaming or studio type setup.
Okay, that makes sense. And then they have the straight up E2, which also does like it's a 4K micro four thirds something.
Yeah. I think the E2C may be the newer version of the E2. I'm guessing on that.
Okay, yeah. So like kind of makes sense. And so the ones we want to talk about, I guess, were I thought this E2M5G thing was interesting.
Yeah.
Mostly because it is a global sensor camera that is like, I don't remember if they released the price. It's like less than $4,000 kind of thing.
I can't remember if they actually have a price on it or not.
Right, because like it was just announced at the recent camera show thing, and like it's kind of cool because like it's a global sensor, and they have a bunch of interchangeable mounts for it, and so like if you really want it to be Super 35, you can get like an EF with a speed booster in it.
Yep.
Or you can put like, I guess like PL maybe, or a Micro Four Thirds mount, or you can buy mounts that have like ND options in them to slide in.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a lot of options like how you're using it. And then if you really need that low shutter speed, like you're shooting a lot of fast action, having that global shutter option for something that's cheap is kind of really cool. And that's what I think they're pushing on this.
And it seems like they're at least claiming that they still get good dynamic range, which is usually the problem with global shutter stuff.
Right, you're going to lose like a stop. And so they're saying 16 stops of dynamic range, which
hard to believe.
That feels like that's got to be like the what the sensor can do, and it's probably more like 12 or 13 as far as like clean-ish stops. I would expect.
Yep.
And I mean, like, so like you're losing a stop on the fact that it is global shutter, but they're saying that they're doing the whole dual gain thing. And so they're grabbing, a high gain and a low gain off the sensor, combining it into one image, and that's how they're getting that higher dynamic range.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I mean, that one seemed interesting. And, when I saw that $4,000 price point, it's like, well, this seems like a pretty good camera for, I don't know if that's the actual price, but that seemed like what people were thinking the price was going to be.
Right.
And, I've seen Zcam here and there and started looking up some of their other models. And I'm just surprised at how cheap some of that stuff is.
Yeah, they're like super, super cheap.
Yep.
So you put the E2 F6 not Pro on here. Wait, sorry, the Pro.
I think I put the Pro. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong part of the notes. You put the Zcam E2 F6 Pro on here. So tell me a little bit about this one.
So that one is also, I had to just look up what the price was. That one's also about $4,000.
So it's the same price as their newer one, and it came out also recently, like in the last year.
Yeah, and I can't remember what's different about the Pro versus the non-Pro.
So
this is a full frame 6K non-global shutter, so it's a rolling shutter.
It seems like some of the things that are different are like you get a 12G SDI output, whereas the other one, I don't even think the original F6 had SDI output.
Yeah.
In order to get SDI, you had to. So like on the back of the Zcam F6 not Pro, it's an NPF slot plate, and you could buy a separate module that's slotted in on the battery plate, and that added SDI output.
So they built that into the Pro,
right? And so like the Pro and the not, both F6 models have like a 2-pin power input, and then they also have a battery input. But the Pro is a V mount.
Oh, okay.
And then they added basically the things that you would normally get on the back of the module for they added it to the Pro. And so getting that V mount, getting the 12G are pretty big, and it seems like it also comes with a monitor that you can use instead of having to buy that separately.
Yeah, but it's like that's an interesting combination, because I feel like the real advantage to that Pro is the SDI output, because one problem that the F6 series has from watching Gerald's video and doing research is basically these cameras are kind of compromised on how you actually record the footage.
Right.
Because you have a CFast card built in.
Not CF Express, but CFast.
Yeah, which is expensive for the capacity. And anytime you're doing, and they do have a USB-C port on them, so you could record to an SSD, which is cool. But the problem is that anytime you record internally on these cameras, if you lose power during that recording, you lose the entire file.
Right. It corrupts everything.
And their solution to this is to give you a way to split the files. So you can split them like every 1 minute, every 5 minutes, all the way up to like every hour if you want. But basically it splits these files. And then the gotcha here is that you have to use Zcam software to combine those files after when you're ready to work on them.
Right, because whenever it splits it leaves like a frame gap with the audio, and it's just like it will not line up, and so you have to use their concatenator.
Yep.
In order to combine everything.
Yeah, which is just like adds extra work to your post-processing workflow. And so to me, it feels like the only viable way to use these cameras is to use this particular one at least, is to record externally. So like, that's where SDI seems nice, because I don't love the idea of having my fancy cinema camera and then plugging in an HDMI cable and just like hoping it doesn't come loose. And SDI at least kind of locks in.
It does seem like, though, recording externally on these is weird. I don't know if they've like how much Atomos has kind of improved some of like the handshaky stuff that happens between like what is the camera outputting and what does the monitor see. But it seems like there's some limitation on, you're getting this camera that is it's basically a 6K sensor, but most of the external recorders will only do 4K.
Right.
And so like you're not necessarily getting all of the cool stuff. You can't get the Z RAW that does. And I don't think it will do RAW over SDI.
Well, I
is
know
that right?
it did over HDMI, so I would assume so.
All right. Well, so I probably got that wrong. But even still, it's like it gets a little weird. And then if you're doing things like if you want to put zebras or a LUT or something, it seems like if you do any effect on top of the footage over HDMI, it impacts the video quality.
Yeah, which to be fair, like that's not going to be a problem if you're recording externally, because you're not going to use like a focus assist or anything on your HDMI feed if you're also trying to record over HDMI.
That's true. Yeah, you want to make sure that you do have a clean feed.
But that was a really weird issue with the regular F6 is that like even if you're just monitoring, it's like as soon as you turn on a waveform or something, your footage gets worse, which like that's terrible. I wouldn't want that. I mean, the recorded version, internally on the camera was fine, so it's not like your long-term file's bad, but if I'm trying to monitor the shot, I want it to be like sharp,
Yeah, exactly.
It's really weird.
It just seems like there's a lot of weird gotchas with these cameras. Like if you do decide to shoot internally and you shoot on Z-RAW, you have to use their RAW processing, and like you're kind of stuck.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just like it makes me wonder how much this stuff extends across their lineup, because, for example, like there's the E2 M4, which is a micro four thirds camera, but it's $1,500 and it has a lot of great specs. I mean, in terms of being able to record ProRes 4444 RAW, having a lot of codec options for H.265. You can record the Z-RAW, all that stuff. Frame rates were really high. I mean, some of these things can do like, I can't remember what that one was specifically, but some of these can do, 6K at 75 frames per second, or 4K at 160 frames per second. I mean, they have really good specs, but seeing some of the issues with that F6 just kind of makes me feel like the issue with these cameras is that they offer those specs and they offer some great features, but then some of the polish just isn't there.
Right. It does seem like they're reliable. I mean, all of the reviews and stuff that we see on these things, like they're not necessarily like turning off and crashing on you and making you lose footage. They're reliable. It's just like there's so many gotchas with you don't really want to record internally because it's splitting the files and because of the possible corruption issue and having to pay for CFast. Ooh. And then like recording externally, if you're not on the Pro, you like dealing with HDMI cables or, SDI. SDI is better, but like having to deal with all the external stuff. And then I'm looking here at the page for Atomos, and for the F6 Pro, you do get 6K RAW up to 30p.
Okay.
So like you can shoot in ProRes RAW, but to clarify, you can't shoot in ProRes 4444
okay.
It's ProRes 422 if you're recording externally. So like if you want to get the best quality, you have to shoot in RAW. And then you're having to deal with, now you have ProRes RAW, and so you're really messing in like Adobe or Final Cut, or unless you want to process it and move it into your Blackmagic situation if you're using Resolve. And like there's so many like little gotchas.
It's
like
just
you can't get exactly what you want.
The edges are rough. And I feel like the biggest competition for these things is the Blackmagic pocket cameras, because that's kind of a similar price point, similar sort of feature set. These cameras definitely offer higher frame rates. They offer the better codecs, being able to record H.265, stuff like that. And then the big thing they offer is just the box format. I mean, we've talked on this show several times about how, like if you're trying to rig something up, box camera style seems better than that pocket camera style. But I just think it's interesting in the context of everybody getting so upset recently about the Blackmagic Cinema camera not being a box style. And it's like in every other respect, like workflow wise and stuff, the Blackmagic stuff seems way better. But in this one area, it's like they haven't directly attacked Zcam yet, because they're kind of offering you like which thing do you want to prioritize?
Right. Yeah, I mean, exactly. And I am looking here. It seems like Blackmagic Video did add B-RAW support for the Zcam. So if you did need B-RAW, you can use your other recorder. And so like it seems like there's more and more support kind of slowly growing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like the Blackmagic maybe is a little more user-friendly for certain workflows, and seems like it is more polished towards a lot of these like weird tiny compromises.
Yeah, I think so.
But if you are looking for like something that's cheap, that's a box cam, like Zcam kind of owns this little section of the market
Yeah.
they've carved out for themselves.
Mhm. I just think they're interesting. It's not really a brand you hear about that much, but it's kind of, they offer you something unique that you don't get from other brands.
Yeah, and it is cool to see a global shutter in a camera that's $4,000.
For sure.
Though I guess like you could probably find, you think you could find like a used Komodo for that price?
I don't know. Start doing some Googling, find out.
Yeah, I'm going to find out. Let's see, used red Komodo 6K kit on M. I'm getting so many MPB links recently. $5,250, $5,300. So no,
Still a little high.
The Komodo is going to cost you a little more. So still this Micro Four Thirds option is it's cheaper.
Yep. I mean, you kind of mentioned, the F6 uses the same sensor as the Panasonic S1H, which means that the BS1H is basically the same camera but Panasonic.
Right.
And that's a pretty interesting comparison.
Yeah,
too.
and I mean you can find those for what, $3,500 or something.
You can get them used for like $2,200.
Yeah, so that's full frame, and like I guess the F6 Pro is full frame too. Yeah. But like it's the same sensor, you get similar dynamic range, but then you get all the cool Panasonic stuff. You get
the polish of Panasonic that you're not getting on this.
Right. So I think that's maybe more appealing than any of these cameras here, but it is kind of cool to see what Zcam's doing, and it's nice to have like this other option. And like all of these cameras, it seems like they have like Ethernet out, and so like they're great for like live streaming and that sort of thing. So
and I will say I've been impressed seeing some of the firmware updates they've released for these. It seems like they're one of those brands that does add big features in firmware updates. And that's something that you see more in like these cinema cameras than you do on, like consumer level mirrorless stuff. I mean, we complain on this show a lot about how like Fuji and Sony don't update their cameras very much after they release. And I just feel like I've noticed like you talking about some of these older cinema cameras, Panasonic, like releasing updates that had like big new features. We've seen Panasonic do that here and there. And Zcam seems like they definitely do it too. So all that to say, I mean, I do hope they keep improving this stuff. And, especially some of these things that seem like software issues, that's something they could fix in a firmware update. So hopefully they'll keep working on them.
Yeah, for sure. It's cool to see this stuff. Whenever I watched the thing on the E2 M5G, this is kind of like a weird aside, but I was like, what it was like Cine something did a video, maybe it was Cine D, I don't remember. And the guy was talking about the camera, and he clearly didn't know anything about the camera. They were asking very technical things, and he's like, global shutter's cool.
That's awkward.
Yeah, and he was like, it uses a sensor from a well-known sensor manufacturer. Wink, 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 wink. It's like, okay, yeah, we get it. It's a Sony sensor.
They're all Sony sensors.
They are all Sony sensors. I was looking to remind myself what mounts these things come with, and it looks like the F6 Pro is EF, but you can stick an M, a Micro Four Thirds, a PL, and an LPL mount on there.
A lot of options there.
Does M is the Leica mount, right?
I think that's right. That's a weird mount.
I don't know, but does that answer the question?
Maybe it does.
Like I'm wondering, like, why is Cook making things for M mount?
It's for Zcam.
It was for Zcam the whole time. Though you probably would just get LPL and put a locking PL mount, because I feel like that's a better mount.
Yeah, I would think so too.
Because it locks, Daniel.
But what if you also wanted to use it on your Leica camera because you own both a Leica camera and a Zcam?
That's a cross section. I want to meet that person. You're like, yeah, I really like my Leica, but sometimes when I need to shoot video, I can whip out my Zcam.
Yeah. That person's out there somewhere.
Similarly priced.
Yes, indeed.
Yeesh. Okay. Enough about all these joker camera brands. Like, no one cares about Panasonic and Zcam. Let's talk about the only camera brand that matters. And that's Canon.
Are we going to talk about the rumors about the R5 Mark II?
What? There's rumors? Tell me about it, Daniel.
There are.
What do you got?
I don't know enough to tell you, but there are rumors.
That's it? So that there are rumors.
There are rumors.
And you can't tell me what they are.
I saw a headline and it was Canon, and I was like, I don't care enough to look at that.
Oh, jeez. Killing me, Daniel. Killing me. Okay. I saw some rumors, since we're talking about Canon rumors now, all of a sudden. That Canon's going to open up their mount. I don't know. Like, I've heard people talking about this like it's a fact,
I
can't
believe
I
that.
can't find any sort of like press release or whatever that says that it's actually true. It's like I think there was one interview from one Canon CEO where he was like, "Yeah, well, like we're working with people or something."
Something vague like that.
Yes, which I mean, it could have been those Cook lenses. Who knows?
No, that's true.
Wait, those weren't for RF, or were they? Were they? Doesn't matter, Daniel. Point is, I don't think they're going to do it. I think that it's just all smoke and mirrors, and we all think that they're going to open up the RF mount, but I don't think they're actually going to open up the RF mount.
I mean, I kind of don't either. It's been this long that you would think they would have had all this time to do it if they were going to, and they clearly haven't wanted to. So unless something big changes about their business, I don't think they will.
They gotta stick to your guns.
Yeah, and they are.
Now that we've squashed that bug, there's a new RF lens in town, and it's a 10-20 f4.
I mean, I don't know. I guess that's about comparable to some of those APS-C. Like it's comparable to what, like the Fuji 8-16 f2.8. That's like basically the same lens for RF.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, it's not literally the same, but like it's the same specs.
All right, now get ready.
Okay.
This is a full frame lens.
Right. Yeah.
Daniel, do you know what this means? Think of another full frame zoom lens that has that wide of a field of view.
I guess that is pretty wide for full frame because they normally stop around 15 or something, right?
Yeah.
So,
Just think about it. How many out there are there?
I wouldn't know.
Zero.
This
is the widest full frame lens you can buy.
Interesting.
That's a zoom. Sorry, that's a zoom. Let me clarify that. You can get like a Sigma or so or whatever. Maybe it's no, because it's RF. I think there's one that's like Canon has like a 15 or whatever, and like Sony has one that's like an 11 to something, and it's a 2.8.
Okay.
And so, but this RF, 10 mil. That's like 100.
pretty
It's like
wide.
163 degrees or something. It's like
on full frame,
crazy
it's
wide.
very wide.
Crazy wide. I mean, you see a 10-20, you're like, oh, that's an APS-C lens. Nope. It's a full frame. I'm just saying, this is a pretty big deal, Daniel.
Yeah, that's pretty wide. I bet it's a pretty big lens too.
Oh, it's probably huge. I think I didn't even write down the filter size.
Because it uses rear filters,
That's
right?
right, exactly. That's right. I did write that down. And you can slide things in the back. And also, I was lying. It's 130 degree field of view.
That's still pretty wide.
It's pretty stinking wide.
Yeah.
EF 11-24 is the other one that I was supposed to compare it to.
Okay.
So like they had that lens that was for EF way back when. And it's like this is basically the RF replacement for it, but wider, better. Has OIS, like 5-hole stops.
As if you need that on a 10 mil.
I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe you're doing like real long exposure landscape stuff.
I guess if you're vlogging with it.
Sure, maybe you're vlogging with it. You gotta have.
You're like
gotta
on the
have
run. You need it. Yeah.
Yep. This thing's gonna cost. Let me think. I think it's somewhere around $1 billion, maybe more. It's gonna cost $2,300.
I mean, it's high, but that price doesn't surprise me because every RF lens is super expensive.
Yeah, that's like right in the pocket for RF glass from Canon.
And this is not fisheye, right? It's like a normal.
No, it is. I mean, it's got like a nice bulbous front.
Oh, okay.
It's basic, like it's not a fisheye lens, but it's basically a fisheye lens.
Okay.
That's why you have all the rear filters and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense.
Daniel, you're not excited enough about this lens.
I'm not excited about it. I don't know. I mean, it seems fine, I guess, but
I'm going to dig in here a little bit on why this is a big deal.
okay. Convince me.
It's so wide. I'm just saying, like, if I did something for the first time, like in all of history, you'd be like, wow, Lucas, that's the first time anyone stood on their head and ate a banana. No one's ever done that before, which I know remarkable. Canon's over here doing that. Just those banana eaters doing their thing. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. They're like, why do you want to shoot Canon? Because we're making lenses that no one else makes. Look at this f2 zoom that we make. It's so fast. Look at these like fantastic lenses. And you want to go wide? Look how wide this lens is. And they're like throwing confetti and dropping microphones. And then they're like, screw all other lens mounts because they don't need them.
Sounds like you should work for Canon marketing over there.
I mean, no. I'm trying to build a hype train here, Daniel.
Yeah,
We should all be like super pumped about how cool this thing is.
If you say so.
It's super cool.
I guess all these red shooters can use it since it's RF mount.
Yeah, man. They're going to start shooting their movies on at 10 mil.
Yeah. That won't give anybody vertigo.
Yeah, I mean, like, it'll have a little vignetting, but you put that on like a large format cinema camera, you know, one of those like, you know, 42 millimeter width sensors, and go freaking 130 degrees. Get those really close up. It's like a 5-to-1 macro. I mean, you can get some weird stuff with this thing.
No kidding. Well, that's cool. Glad they're doing new stuff. Still think it's overpriced, but maybe it's not overpriced, but it's just all these lenses are expensive.
I mean, is it overpriced for the world's first auto-focusing rectilinear zoom that goes to a 10 millimeter coverage, Daniel? How can you put a price on that?
Canon did. It is $2,300.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
We can't end on that note, Lucas.
Well, then end on something else. Impress me, Daniel.
I don't know, man. What else is there today? I mean, we've talked about all these cinema cameras. We talked about some weird RF lens. I mean, what else we got?
That's it. That's all I got. That's
all
the whole show, Daniel.
That's all you brought?
Yeah, I brought everything. What more do you want? I'm coming. I talked about movies. I talked about Panasonic cameras, which you don't want for some reason.
I didn't say I didn't want it. I think the thing's pretty cool.
And then we belabored on about these Nikon cameras that no one cares about. And
we belabor on about Nikon cameras a lot, but that is not what we did today.
There was an episode like 3 episodes back where I was making some gag where I started listing every camera manufacturer, and like, not even as a joke, I forgot to list Nikon. I was listening back and I was like, that's pretty funny. Was that intentional?
Jokes on jokes.
Oh boy. Yeah. So, and do I issue an apology? No, never apologize.
No, never apologize.
Never apologize.
Yep. Just go on as if nothing happened. It'll all be fine. That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us. And if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com, and you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.